Well, hello, my name's Louise Savage of Louise Savage Muses. Welcome to my channel. If you've not joined me before, welcome back if you have. I've been really excited for this video because it's my first ever wrap up. So this is my summary of my reading throughout January. I hope you enjoy it. So first up, I started off the year with a bang because I absolutely adored Oyinkan Braithwaite's My Sister the Serial Killer when it came out a couple of years ago. Really championed that book. I absolutely still love it. It stayed very much in my memory. I was lucky enough to meet her as well. She's a lovely, lovely young woman from Nigeria. And yeah, her storytelling is very powerful. So I approached this with a little bit of trepidation because it's been a while since she published, and you know, when you've really enjoyed a book, you worry, don't you, that you might not enjoy the next one as much. This is an absolute delight. It tells the story. It's called, as you can see, The Baby Is Mine, and it tells the story of a young man, Bambi, and his girlfriend's thrown him out. He goes to live with his auntie, and when he arrives at his auntie's house, she's apparently just had a baby. And I'll say just have, I don't think it's newborn, but he hasn't seen her since the baby's arrived. And there's also a young woman living in the house as well. And it becomes a story about paternity, about responsibility, about his relationship with this baby as it develops. And also it sort of looks at the shadow of his father's relationships. It's comic in places. There's also that wonderful sort of sense of African Nigerian storytelling. So you've got lots of kind of taboos and wonderful cultural detail. So I thoroughly recommend this, and I was really glad I started the month with it. Got it off to a flying reading start. The second book on my list, I've never read any Thomas Ellis, and I've always been quite fascinated to read her. And somebody gave me this version of what's it called, Unexplained Laughter. Now, I did enjoy reading it, but it didn't stick with me. So it was a quick read, and it focuses on this girl called Lydia who's gone to live in the Welsh countryside with her friend Betty. And Lydia is really quite demanding. There's a kind of mystery in that the house that they're in, there's this laughter that Lydia can hear in the garden from time to time. So you begin to wonder whether it's real, whether it's imagined, whether there's a ghost out there. The thing I did enjoy about this novel was the relationship between Lydia and Betty. Betty just seems to, as a friend, just seems to kind of run around Lydia. She cooks for her, she does all sorts of things. And Lydia treats her absolutely appallingly. And there's also, of course, a couple of sort of love interest, in inverted commas, involved. It hasn't made me want to rush off and read any more of Thomas Ellis's books, I'm afraid. But I suspect that I'll give it a go. It was quite dated. Now, that's not surprising. I'm trying to think when it was published. When was it published? I'm going to have to put my glasses on to find that out. Bear with me. It was published in 1986. Now, it felt to me, as I was reading it, to be more dated than that. It didn't seem to reflect the world of the 80s at all, but maybe that was the point. I'm probably missing something, but it's not a book that I would particularly want to rave about, I don't think. However, this gem, The Talented Mr Ripley by Patricia Highsmith, oh my goodness. It's the first time I've ever read any of her novels. I'm shocked myself. I loved this. It's subterfuge. It's the talented Mr Ripley is called Tom, and he is just fantastic at disguise and pretending to be somebody that he's not. And he's a chancer, he's clever, he's an observer, and he kind of limps his way out to Europe on this ruse to try and track down, or well, not track down, to try and persuade Dickie, who's the son of a very wealthy American businessman, to go back to America because he's kind of become estranged from his parents, and his mother is very ill with cancer. So they've been begging Dickie to come home, but Dickie's having a fantastic time in Italy, doing almost like the old-fashioned grand tour, but it's, I think, the 1930s. And it's just, well, I couldn't put it down from one, end to the other. It encompasses several murders, and if you love travel, and if you've been to the Mediterranean or you haven't, I think it really evokes something. There's something in this that really took me back to Italy, which is where the novel is mainly based. There are fantastic, very, very memorable, very dramatic scenes in this book that I know will stay with me forever. And apparently there are some more books about Ripley, so I'm sure that I'll be dripping those into my reading over the next few years, because I really did love this book. It made me rush off to watch the film with Matt Damon and Jude Law, and again, I thoroughly enjoyed the film. It didn't disappoint. So I recommend both the book and the film, but as ever, for goodness sake, read the book first. Great cover as well, I really like it. There's something very retro about it, isn't there? Then I moved on to some mythological reading. Look at that gorgeous cover. It's reflecting all the beautiful light there. Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. Now, I always approach a classical retelling with some trepidation, because of course I am a classicist by trade, and I always worry that it's going to kind of, spoil my own version of the myth that I have in my head, or, trample all over it, or whatever it might be. But I was really, really pleasantly surprised by this. I've got no idea why. I wasn't expecting to enjoy it, and there's nothing rational about that at all. Don't know why that was. But I absolutely loved the scope of it, because not only does it tell the story of Theseus and the Minotaur and Ariadne's involvement with the release of Theseus from the labyrinth and that kind of love affair, she also manages to include the story of Daedalus and Icarus, which is part of that myth cycle anyway. But Daedalus, the master craftsman of the ancient world, he features on and off throughout this novel. And also she transports us to Athens. She makes sure that not only do we sort of spend time on Crete, and we spend time on Naxos, which is the island that Ariadne was famously abandoned on, but also we see Athens at the time, and you get this picture as well of Ariadne's sister Phaedra, who of Phaedra and Hippolytus fame. Now again, if you don't know the myth, I'm not going to tell you because it'll spoil it, but I was really impressed with the way that she tackled that as well. So there's an awful lot of aspects of that myth cycle, the Cretan myth cycle, that Jennifer Saint focuses on. The other thing I loved about it was the portrayal of the god Dionysus. I thought that was absolutely superb. And he kind of develops and changes as well as the novel progresses. It's another one of those novels that the locations, the places are still kicking around in my head. And the descriptions of the sea and being on an island, and also the way that she kind of reinstates Ariadne as a character and tells her story very, very differently. I really did thoroughly enjoy this. It was an absolute romp and a very easy, enjoyable read, beautifully, clearly, carefully written and researched. Thank you for this one. And next up, very different read, is Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. And I had not come across her before. Again, total ignorance on my part, but she is a very famous Black American writer this was written in the 1930s. And the leading character in this, Janie, is sensational. I mean, she's just, first of all, Zora Neale Thurston's, it's a mouthful, writing is very poetic. It's beautiful. She writes quite sort of philosophical in places, descriptions, but also a lot of it is written in dialect form, and she manages to do it so that you're not alienated by it. You know, as a white British reader, I was able to read this Afro-American dialect very readily and thoroughly enjoyed that aspect of it. Obviously it's a novel about race because it's written by a black woman at a time when black women weren't writing, so by its very existence. But actually in many ways it's much more a novel about women, about not exactly feminism. I don't know whether that's necessarily how she would have expressed it, but certainly about a woman's right to choose, particularly who she lives with, marries. So Janie, the character that the novel focuses on, is brought up largely by her grandmother, and she's surrounded by white children, and she's shown a photograph at one point very early in the story, and she doesn't see herself in the photograph. She's looking at this photograph and saying, well, where am I? And somebody points and says, well, that's you. And she's the black girl in the picture. She didn't realise that she didn't even know she was black. And I just found that it gave me some of the same feelings that I had when I read The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennett last year for the Women's Prize. You know, that whole sort of glimpse into what it's like to see things through a black woman's eyes was really interesting to me. And anyway, so she gets into trouble with her grandma when she's about 16 because she's seen kissing a man, and immediately, you know, her reputation is going to be tarnished. And so she's sent off to marry this much, much, much older man. And, you know, the experience of that marriage is carefully explored, as is the experience of her subsequent marriage to somebody else. And eventually, Janie finds love with this character called Tea Cake. And the novel kind of moves to the Everglades, and she calls it, what does she call it? Something like in the mud. And the descriptions of the Everglades, really, really interesting. So I just found this novel engaging from start to finish because it was a world that I didn't know very much about. And, you know, it's at a time when new towns are springing up in America, in the West, and you know, she's kind of involved in that aspect as well. So yeah, really, really glad I came across this. And again, another super writer that I know I'll be returning to. And then finally, although not quite, as I'll explain in a minute, is The Way of All Flesh by Ambrose Parry. Now again, I hadn't read anything by Ambrose Parry before. I was really interested to find that Ambrose Parry is actually two people. It's a wife and husband writing team, which I don't think I've come across before. What a fantastic idea. Oh my goodness, if you want a fantastic historic romp, this is your novel. I loved this, and I was really lucky that I went up to Edinburgh October half term and last year, and the novel is set in Edinburgh. It's got a fantastic map. If you've been watching my channel, you'll know how I love a map in a novel. And it's about this young man called Raven who is training to be a doctor in Edinburgh. It's set in the 1840s. It's definitely got a sort of, you know, nod to Jekyll and Hyde, that kind of thing, Burke and Hare. And this young doctor is not quite what he seems. He owes money to some real cutthroat characters. There's a lot of, he's pursued by them, and there are some really quite unpleasant encounters with these men that he owes money to. He goes to work with a doctor who is developing what do you call it when you put people out, anaesthetic, to make sure that people are unconscious while they're having surgery. And the female half of Ambrose Parry, the writers, is a doctor. So the novel, I think, was born out of a lot of research that she did. I think she was doing an MSc or something like that, and she did a lot of research about, particularly, I think, about how women were treated, young pregnant women, well, not necessarily young. So there's also this this whole world of kind of backstreet abortion, and I learnt so much through reading this. It's beautifully researched, but you're not remotely conscious that that's what's happening. You're just reading a really good yarn. But the descriptions of the things women had to go through and the way they were treated when they became pregnant, if they were unmarried, are just as shocking as you might imagine they would be. If you like specimens in jars and medical gory detail, this is definitely the novel for you. And again, I could not put this down. It's a real page turner, and there are, again, some really fantastic characters in here. So a thoroughly wonderful reading month. Now, I did also read this month the books that were shortlisted for the Costa Book Awards, but I'm not going to talk about those today because I've made another video which is already posted on my channel, so I didn't want to kind of repeat content. So that was Fall, about Robert Maxwell, by John Preston, which was a really interesting biography. I read The Crossing, which was actually, if I had to name a favourite, that's the one I chose that I probably would have wanted to win the prize, about two young people, one a British girl in Dover and a young man in Somalia, and he has to journey across, well, didn't have to, he has to leave Somalia and journey across, make that awful journey across the sea to Europe to try and sort of, forge a new life. That's a fantastic read. What else was there? Oh, Unsettled Ground by Claire Fuller. Beautiful story about two siblings in their 50s, and deals with rural poverty. There was a wonderful... have I forgotten one? How many is that? That's Fall, The Crossing, Unsettled Ground. Oh, my poor little brain. It's forgotten one. I know it has. That's terrible. There was, anyway, the winner was The Kids by Hannah Lowe, which is a fantastic volume of poetry, which Hannah was a teacher in a sixth form college, and she writes all about her experiences of teaching, her relationship with the kids, but also about her own experience of school, and her young son's experiences too. It's just a really sort of heartwarming, very educational read, and every single poem is a sonnet, so you just get this kind of snapshot of life in the classroom. And I am still, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to come back because I'm going to have to find out what that novel was. I can't remember. Dear, oh dear, oh dear. Oh, of course, it was Open Water. So I also read Open Water by Caleb Nelson, and again, I thought that was just a beautifully told love story and a kind of ode to the problematic life of being a young black man in London. and the power of art. So, thank you very much. A fantastic diet I had of reading during January. February has also got off to a flying start, but I'm not going to reveal what I'm reading at the moment yet. Anyway, do take care, everybody, and wishing you happy reading over the next 4 weeks. Take care. Bye.